Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I've got a guest who's returned, a glutton for punishment, as I call them. Don't know why anybody would come back twice, but there you go, hitting the bottom of the barrel yet again. But for me, not for you, David. Certainly. He's one out of everybody else, and I'm the last one. So there you go. Welcome back, David. It's good to have you back. And just before we jump into the show, and David's going to talk about I mean, he's a fascinating guy, to be honest, a really interesting background, which we're going to learn all about. But before we do that, please do um, subscribe to the channel, as they say. I'm also really interested in hearing what you do and don't like, folks. So leave me some comments, and if you'd like to hear more about a particular subject or issue, I'd like to know because I'm sure I'd find it interesting, and I'll find a guest and bring them on. And actually, if you think you've got something interesting to say about something, let me know. I'll bring you on. Why not? So there you go. Enough of that. David, welcome back. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing fine. Good to see you again.
Good. Where are you based again?
New Orleans.
New Orleans. I thought there was a little twang of something there. I don't
There is. I can't get rid of it for some reason.
know. Would you want to, though? It's got quite a distinctive sort of place in the world's mind, I think, this accent.
So I'm told.
Yeah, yeah. So, and how is it over there? What sort of time are we on now for you?
It's good. It's good. The summer heat is lifted finally. August and September is rough,
Yeah,
hot and humid, and then the weather's glorious now,
yeah.
just like
Well,
in the UK, right?
it's I've got some light today, so I'm happy with that. I'll go with that.
Right.
It wasn't so glorious yesterday, I can tell you, but today's fine. And what sort of time is it for you now? I'm just approaching mid-afternoon.
Yeah, it's 9 in the morning here.
Okay. So we've got you at the beginning of your day.
Yep.
And is New Orleans where you grew up?
It is. I spent my early childhood years here. I went to college and medical school here, and then left for 26 years and returned here a handful of years ago
Yeah,
when I was ready to get back home.
yeah, yeah. And what was it like growing up in New Orleans? We see the films with the carnival and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is it like that, or is it just like a city anywhere else?
It was a great place to grow up.
Yeah,
Culturally, many cultural opportunities, a very diverse population, the music, the food,
yeah,
festivals, Mardi Gras. There was never a shortage of things to do. I really liked growing up here, and I liked actually returning here. I had been in California for most of my career,
right.
and in the Bay Area, and you can't think of two more different places,
Yeah,
the Bay Area and New Orleans.
yeah. I mean, California is amazing. I love it. It's one of my favorite places in the world, to be honest. But
Yeah.
yeah, very distinct. I always think that sort of New Orleans is it somehow isn't American somehow. I don't know what I mean by that, but it's very, very international in some ways, I think.
Yeah, my father had a saying that he repeated often, usually at cocktail parties, that New Orleans isn't the southernmost North American city; it's the northernmost South American city. And,
Oh, well, that's
and,
interesting.
and
Yes,
I think that that's about right.
that makes a lot of sense. I think that's quite an astute observation. And of course, there's a very strong French influence. Do you speak French as well?
I don't. I mean, not enough to order at restaurants, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And there's a Spanish influence here. There's a French influence, which is heavy, obviously.
Yeah.
And
And the Creole, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
massively powerful.
A lot of people. I was at a restaurant last night, a Jamaican chef. A lot of people from the islands here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I love it.
It somehow seems to work very well. The impression is that I get that sort of hodgepodge mix. It's like a what do you call it? A gumbo.
That's right. I think so, and it attracts people that are interested in that. It's not a particularly big city. I mean, I think people who visit here go downtown and get the impression that it's a city, but there's only 400,000 people
Well,
that live in New Orleans proper, so it's actually a fairly small town.
yeah, that is actually yeah, very small.
Yeah,
I hadn't
yeah,
realized. Uh,
yeah.
but and for such a small town to have such a big sort of image on the international stage as well is quite significant. Did you know that everybody knows about New Orleans when you're growing up there? Was that sense in which it did have this big projected image?
Yeah, I was vaguely aware of it, but I must say, I thought since I spent so much of my life here, I mean, I didn't leave till I was finished with medical school in 1990. I thought everywhere was like New Orleans. In other
It
words,
is.
I thought that this was the norm.
Yeah,
And then when I moved away, I found out pretty quickly it's not the norm.
it's definitely not.
And I, I always like hearing the people that visit and they tell me about their experiences there. And I encourage people that do visit to get out of the downtown area because
Yeah,
that's really a very small slice of it that's frankly built for the tourists, whereas the rest of the city is, built for the locals. And
yeah.
I think it's a fascinating place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And quite a mix of people, quite a mix of cultures, which is also very true of your own family, isn't it? 'Cause sort of
Absolutely.
two sets of cultures that are uniquely blended, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, I think that that's right. I mean, I think, and I write about this in the book, and it's some of what I wanted to get across is that New Orleans has two big groups of people. It has a very rich Catholic population here. We don't have counties as many states in the United States do. We have parishes.
Right.
And there's a Catholic church here on every corner almost.
Hmm.
And then there's this multi-generational Jewish population here that's smaller, certainly, than the Catholic population, but distinct and has been around for a long time. And, as I write about in the book, when growing up, I didn't really fit into either one
Yeah.
of the categories, and that's what sort of motivated the book.
And your parents carry different traditions, don't they?
Absolutely. My mother is Southern Baptist from Selma, Alabama, of
Yeah.
civil rights fame. Went to the church, as she says, every time the doors were open,
Mhm.
and ended up turning her back on her religion as the civil rights movement got heated up. She disagreed with some of the church's stance toward the civil rights movement.
Mhm.
And then my father grew up in Berlin, Germany, Holocaust survivor to the extent that he had to flee the country in
Yeah.
1939. A lot of relatives, as I found out doing my research for the book, a lot of my relatives didn't make it. My grandfather was in Buchenwald concentration camp.
Mm.
And part of this exploration was
Mm.
finding out, where I came from, because my father was not the kind of person to talk endlessly about these kinds of things. And so I wanted to find out for my own, really, where I came from.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was your sense of that? Were you aware of those types of dynamics growing up? Was it sort of discussed in the family?
It really was not discussed, Noel. I was vaguely aware that my
Right.
father might be Jewish and probably was. And I knew that he was from Germany. He spoke with a slight accent, not a heavy accent, a slight accent. And but didn't know much about his experience there, and certainly didn't know much about my family's, as I came to find out, 650-year history there. I did some genealogy work in doing this book and found that my family could be traced all the way to a guy named Judah Weil who was born in 1300
Wow.
and could follow my family's footsteps all the way to World War II, essentially. And they were all
So
sort of
you
close.
weren't inculcated into the sort of Jewish community when you were growing up?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I had friends that were Jewish. I had friends that weren't Jewish. I had, people ask me, as kids do, and, you go on a date and people ask you, what religion are you? And I didn't have a really good answer for that.
Mhm.
And it bothered me when I was younger, and then it kind of persisted as I moved through adulthood.
What was it that bothered you about it? Do you remember?
I think just not being able to neatly answer the question.
Right.
And I think all of us, and I write about this in the beginning of my book, I think we're tribal in many ways, and we want to belong to a team. We want to identify in a certain way. And religion's one way to do it. It's certainly not the only way to do it,
Yeah.
but religion's one way to do it. And I could never really do that. So instead, I identified mostly throughout my life when I looked in the mirror, transplant doctor, and then father,
Yeah.
ultimately, and things like that. But I really, I think, missed, and I'm interested in religion, interested in spirituality because of the things I saw in the hospital.
Hmm.
And I really wanted some form of religion in my life. I kind of yearned for it most of my life.
So tell us about, I mean, you trained as a doctor, you became very successful transplant surgeon, which is a very high profile work. I mean, that's really serious stuff. But you had some interesting, I mean, there's a lot of stories about transplants and, how people experience a transplant. And you've sort of researched and looked into that quite a lot, I think, in terms of. So tell us about, the journey into this, what got you interested in transplant and some of the experiences you've had.
Yeah, it's an amazing field. I mean, it's mystical in many ways. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
you're turning around people's life. I mean, and I say that immodestly. I mean, I don't think it's all due to me, but I think that you really are taking someone who's looking at death right in the eye, and then you turn that around. And that's a great feeling for them. It's a great feeling for the people that provide that kind of care. And my first two books were focused a lot on that, but there was something else going on in the hospital when patients would tell me about their own spirituality,
Okay.
their own belief in God. And then I started seeing these near death experiences, people that literally in the ICU in front of me had died, had come back, and had told me, their experience. And it got me thinking quite a bit, especially for somebody that didn't have much religion in their life. It
And what
got me,
sort of things were they telling you that were making you ponder and think?
and I write about this in the book. Um, what I think is really interesting is how comforted people that had a religious background were when they were facing this life and death situation.
Right.
In fact, when they went to the other side, as it were, they would tell me how wonderful it was. And in fact, I tell the story in the book of one patient who said, "Why did you bring me back?" And she was sort of upset with me. And I said,
Hang on, I
"Well,
was having a good time. We should have phoned and asked me.
yeah," I said, it's my job to bring you back." Um, And I said, "Well, what did you see?" And what she said, it was just the most secure, comfortable. My my dogs were there, who had passed. Everybody in the family who I cared about was there, who had passed. Um, I I've had doctors that have experienced the exact same thing said that's nonsense. It was the ICU medication, or they had seen that on TV or something. I I don't know. It sounded very convincing to me.
Okay. I mean,
So
I don't know, but what I do know is that I think when people have those types of experiences, as a psychologist, I prefer that they come back benign and happy rather than terrified, sort of without
yeah,
doubt. It's sort of like I don't wish terror of death on anyone. I've seen the results of that.
no, I couldn't agree more. And I've seen people terrified of dying as well. But
Yeah.
this group of people weren't, and especially after that experience, they were like, whatever
I'm sure
happens,
it was
happens.
transformative. It was like I can face anything now. I mean, there's a whole branch of psychotherapy around called existential therapy, which is literally designed to help people deal with the fear of ending. Because our existence is, as the physical sense, is finite. That's it. That's the truth, and we have to come to terms with that. That we only have a certain amount of time around. Um, this sort of you didn't use the word emptiness. I'm not going to use that word. It's a common thing I've come across with people who weren't given a religion as a child. I mean, what I mean is that get offered a religious culture rather than have it rammed down their throat. Um, But so, for example, I was brought up in a Catholic tradition. I wouldn't consider myself to be Catholic, but I got to make that choice. And friends of mine that I know who weren't given that choice, so they weren't able to say, no, I don't want it, but later on in life do feel that they missed out on something. And it seems to me you're saying something similar, that somehow you weren't given access to that as a child to make up your own mind about.
I think that's exactly it. I mean that, and that for me was important. What's interesting is I have two older sisters who were born and lived in the same house I did.
Yeah,
They don't think about it at all.
yeah.
So I think it's obviously something that was within me that kind of gnawed at me, and like a lot of writers, the things that gnaw at me, I want to write about. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's part of the human condition. And there were specific reasons why both your parents rejected religion. Your
yeah,
mother because of the civil rights movement, your father because of the Holocaust. It's interesting because I know a lot of Jewish people embraced their religion much more. Do you
right.
understand what his decision was and why he made that?
Yeah, yeah. In terms of Holocaust survivors, either first generation, second generation, or even third generation, it seems like those folks go one of two ways: either embrace it deeply,
Yeah,
or say, well, if that's what religion is and that's what religion gets me, no thank you.
yeah.
And my father was clearly in the second camp. And in fact, his name was Hans Weill, a very German sounding name. And I asked him once when I was a little boy, why didn't he name me Hans? Because a lot of my friends had their father's name. And he said, I wouldn't do that to you. And it's interesting how being Jewish to him and to people like him was something that could get you into a lot of trouble and get.
Well, yeah. I mean, it could today as well. I mean, maybe not to the same extent, but there's a lot of danger and intolerance around at the moment around these issues.
I think so.
Without, I mean, there is, without a doubt, it's there. So you're doing this life and death stuff. You're meeting people who have these near-death experiences, and you're meeting a cohort of people who have these near-death experiences who are like, "Why did you bring me back?" Well,
Yeah.
that's quite nice. And that for you started to bring up some questions, I guess. What sort of questions was he bringing up for you?
Well, it made me think that, first of all, that religion could provide a lot of comfort.
Yeah,
And as I moved along in life and, things happened, I needed that. And there was things that I saw at work that upset me just because I don't like losing patients that are my responsibility.
yeah,
And that started to affect me deeply. So I turned to religion as a way to say, if it worked for those folks, maybe it'll work for me too. And I'm not the first person that's done that, obviously.
mm,
And I started reading the Bible
yeah.
because I thought it was as good a place to start as any. And I got one of these daily readers and spent a whole year reading through the Old and New Testament, and then did it again a second time, and then did it again a third time. And I'm glad I did because I really wanted to see a lot of, obviously there's a lot of conversation out there about the Bible, but I wanted to see actually what it said. I didn't want somebody else's interpretation. I wanted to see what it said. And so I was glad to have that experience.
Okay. And what looking back on that, sort of your having that experience, particularly as a scientifically trained person, reading a text like that, what was it like for you?
Yeah, I struggled more with the Old Testament than the New.
Did you? Right.
Yeah, I did. I mean, the stories are fantastical, and they're a little hard to buy. People living for hundreds and hundreds of years,
Yeah.
and you know, but it's storytelling in a way that probably was appropriate 2,000 years ago. But the
And
met
it's pre sort of literate culture.
right,
And
right,
it's passing on messages through stories and oral culture. They would have been told orally, and then somebody wrote them down, and the
right.
person who wrote them down would have been thought of as quite magical because language was, the Bible was quite a magical thing, just simply because most people didn't couldn't read or write, right? Um,
That's right. And but the struggles are the same, right? I mean,
yeah,
we haven't. as humans, we deal with the same things. Obviously, there's no concern about social media or back then or politics or whatever happens to be upsetting you at the moment, but it's dealing with the same thing.
I mean, I think there are, the stories of Noah, the stories of extinction, etc. That there
Yeah.
are, fears of extinction now. So it's hardly news, right? Um, and the human race has gone through sort of quite difficult times. Um, in terms of your search for meaning and purpose, as it were, I mean, I think that's the sort of framing of the conversation. How did it impact upon you as a text?
Um, I think it gave me a basis to look more deeply into religion. I think it was almost a starting point for me.
Okay.
And then I started, and I talk about this in the book as well. I started really digging into the religion that was most available to me at the time, which was Catholicism,
Okay.
because my wife, devout Catholic from a rural farming community in Iowa, our children baptized in the church, raised Catholic. They went off, the three of them, to church every Sunday. I went off to the hospital, my place of worship,
Yeah, that was yours. That's right.
uh, but I felt disconnected from them.
Yeah.
And so when it came time for me to sort of pick a religion, it became a pragmatic decision, a family decision, if you will. I want to be
Yeah.
close to
Yeah.
people I live with. Catholicism was there. So I went through this RCIA program,
Hmm.
where you learn everything about Catholicism every Monday
It's
night.
quite tough converting to Catholicism. It's
It
not
is.
an easy route in.
No,
You have to do
no,
quite a lot of homework.
no. I mean, it was interesting.
Yeah.
I was in
I
California.
think it's tougher than getting a passport in America. Do you know
No, I think that's right. Although they're competitive right now, I'm sure. Uh,
what I
it was a couple, it was a couple hours every Monday night for a
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
and I, but it was really interesting. I mean, I sat
Oh,
down there without any sense of obligation. I would, run from the hospital to these classes, and I really enjoyed it. I'm a fan of Catholicism. It's like
yeah.
I like it. What I think is too bad is, this little sliver, I think, of the part of Catholicism that's maybe less attractive to the public gets blown up, and all the stuff that I think Catholicism does really well is hardly ever discussed. But I guess
Yeah. I
that's
mean, I think there's like I grew up in that tradition, and Catholicism, Islam, Judaism, all these major world religions, they have a social function which most people don't hear about. And a cohesion, a social cohesion function. It's social services, it's helping people out, it's community, but it's also people pitching in and helping people who are less sort of fortunate. And that volunteerism and helpfulness is really embedded. And it certainly were values that were drilled into me. And I don't resent that at all. I think that's absolutely right. You know, being part of the world and doing good in the world is a very much part of who I am. And I learnt it, so I learnt attitudes of service sort of by going to church. And I agree with you. There are things that maybe are blown out of proportion. They're real, they happen. And all religions, I think, as institutions need to change. But that's not what we're talking about here. So you became, I mean, would you call yourself Catholic now?
well, I did, and I don't want to spoil too much of the book, but I came to find out after going through this process and being happily Catholic, as I was promoting one of my books, I basically found out my mother had converted to Judaism before she married my father,
Oh, okay.
which I didn't know
Right.
until she told me at age 88 that she had done that. And this was just a few years ago. And I basically then said, well, in that case, I'm actually Jewish, no matter how I
That's right,
identify.
because it's matrilineal inheritance, right?
That's right. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to sit down and write this book. I've had
Did
enough.
that just blow your mind when she said that?
Yeah, because I was
Like,
like, I can't.
what? Where did that come from?
Well, I thought it was kind of settled, that I
Right.
was, happily Catholic, and it was kind of settled. And
All the smells and bells, as I say, on a
yeah,
Sunday.
and so I end the first part of this book where my mother and I are sitting a few years ago, and she said, I said, you didn't convert to Catholic, to Judaism before you got married, did you? And oh yeah, yeah, I did. I'm like, why? Because and she can't really articulate a reason why she did that other than I don't know. It's just a
Other than
thing.
why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so that was that, and that's when I decided, okay, I'm getting into this now. So that's what started it.
And so you then what? You began to explore what it means to be Jewish in a religious sense, rather than
Yeah,
just an inherited, disjointed
yeah,
cultural sense.
that's exactly right. And then I started finding out more about my family in Germany. I spent
Right.
a good bit of time in Germany, in this little southwest corner where, thousands of my family members lived. They were all sort of clustered there, and then my grandfather got to Berlin, but
Yeah.
the previous 600 years, they were all in this little southwest corner near France, actually.
Right.
Uh, and that's when I started really digging into it and finding out,
That's
okay,
like Alsace or something.
that's exactly right. In fact, in Alsace, there's a village called Weill,
Yeah.
still there.
Okay.
So there was a lot of us there.
Right.
And yeah, that's what I started doing and kind of put it together into a
I
story.
mean, it's not quite the serious matter, but some of the best food I eat is Alsace-Lorraine food. That
I
wonderful
agree.
combination of French and German that is
Yeah,
incredibly unique. It's
yeah, I'm with you. I completely agree.
yeah,
It's one of my favorite places in the world. So
yeah. I mean, I've got a restaurant not far from me, which is very much in that sort of French Alsace tradition.
yeah.
The German schnitzel and the sausage that comes in with this super French cooking. I mean, it's beautiful, absolutely fantastic stuff.
Now you're getting me hungry, Noel. So
Ah, have you not had breakfast yet? Sorry about that.
yeah, I'm going to after we finish.
Right, whoa, I'm jealous. Um, so you then go on a journey of trying to figure out what would it mean to be a Jew in America who inherited Jewishness from somebody who'd rejected it, my father,
Right,
and because it was dangerous to be Jewish.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And
I got
particularly
deep
the
with,
cultural climate at the moment, it still is.
yeah, and I got into that, and I did not get overtly political in it, but I got into the fact that as this building, if you will, was on fire, I kind of ran into it rather than ran away from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I talk about that in the book that, it's an instinct also that helped me be a transplant doctor and help me do the things that I want to do. I don't want to run from things just because they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I do talk about, the October 7th experience. And, one could think that, oh, okay, well, I embraced Judaism because of October 7th, but I was already well on the path before
Yeah.
October.
Just tell people what I know what you're referring to, but what do you mean by October 7th?
Yeah, so when Hamas attacked Israel and
Yeah.
killed 1,200,
Horrific sort of
yeah,
terrorist attack. I
yeah,
mean, it's extraordinarily brutal. And then
yeah,
the response of the Israeli state that, many people would see as over the top. I'm not
right.
going to take sides in that. I'd like them to stop fighting and I'd like there to be peace. That's
Me
it.
too. Me
That's
too.
my line on this.
Me too.
War doesn't help anybody. And I'm an Irishman with 300, 400 years of war against the Brits and
Right.
didn't do us any good.
No, absolutely. And that's a heritage I'm also really interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I walked every day. I lived by Tulane University in New Orleans, and I walked every day by protest and, during this whole journey. And in fact, I write in the book about my conversation, if you will, with one of the protesters.
Okay.
And
What was that like? That's very interesting. How did that go?
well, um, I think the protesters had, they were they're college students, and Tulane was not unique in that there was a lot of college protests going on in the United States, probably
To
abroad
be
as
honest, if
well.
students can't protest, we're done for as a
Yeah,
society. It's over.
totally.
The game's over, right? If we stop young
I,
people
I, I
being
totally agree. I mean, it reminded me a lot, and I write about this too. When I was in college, there were protests about South Africa, about apartheid.
absolutely.
And I thought that was righteous. And I thought that was really important.
And
Uh,
to be honest, I'm a great fan of the moral clarity and simplicity of younger people.
Me too.
And I think the clarity of the message there, whether I agree or disagree, it absolutely needs to be heard. It really does.
Yeah, and I have kids that age, and I want them to take a stand. I want them to be informed and take a stand.
Yeah.
And I think both are important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And
you
so
know,
what
to,
was it like for you though? Because you're trying to explore and make sense and meaning from what is a horrifically fractured history, personal history,
yes,
Your dad is the prototypical refugee from
yes,
the most awful in recent times, disastrous thing that humanity has done. And he understandably just wants to reject all of that, get on with his new life. But you're going backwards in time in a sense to try and embrace it in a way he couldn't.
definitely. And I think I started studying this area that you probably know a whole lot more than I know about emotional inheritance.
Right.
Uh, about people that pass on to future generations their own traumas. And I got very interested in that subject, read a number of books about it, include some of the
Yeah.
information I learned in my book. And I got, it
Well,
was
trauma is epigenetic. We know that.
right, right. And I,
It rewrites our code, and it should do because if you can't, like, if we think about it rationally, it's not possible to give your child all the knowledge of danger that it needs to have. So if you can encode it genetically and then it's passed on that way, then there's a whole body of knowledge they've got, whether it's appropriate knowledge
that's
or
right.
not, but it's there, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I guess a little surprisingly to me, I was wholly unaware of it.
Well, you as a medic, you were like, how did I not know about this?
Right. I mean, it was one of those things that seems, as I read about it, it made total sense to me, and it actually made me understand my own behavior better over the years. It made me understand my father's behavior. And
Fan-
then, but I was completely unaware that this was even a field of study.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I read some excellent books about it,
Yeah.
and it just made perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is real, it's there, and it's useful as well. Like in clinical practice, it's useful, like you just said, if I can explain this to people, they suddenly go, ah, that's why. And suddenly they don't feel I'm out there, there's something broken about me. It's like, it's explicable. Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
Young people in
somehow,
particular love that knowledge, right?
yeah, somehow there's the notion though, take the Holocaust. All right, I'm sitting here in 2025. Well, that happened to all those other people. And yeah, I was related to some of
Yeah.
them, but that's just not the case, obviously.
No,
Uh,
you experienced it.
yeah, I think so. And, the question I had as I researched this and wrote this book is, am I passing that on to my daughters,
Yeah.
or is it stopping with me, or what's going to happen? And that does interest me a
Have
lot. But
you found a conclusion to that? I mean, I've got some answers to that, but for you
no,
personally,
no, I suspect I'm going to pass it along. In
I'm
some,
almost certainly, I think. But that
yeah,
doesn't have to be the story. I mean, I think people get frightened by this stuff, like it's a deterministic thing. The term epigenetic means are the aspects of our code that are affected by our environment.
right, right,
It's not like the color of our eyes. So
right.
if it was passed on, it can be changed. And the key to changing it is self-knowledge.
Hmm.
And there's this thing, isn't there, about people like your dad did it. I'm not going to talk about this stuff, because if I talk about it, it's going to damage you, I suspect, in his head or something. But actually, it's the opposite is true. That when
That's
we
really
share
interesting.
this stuff, we are
Yeah.
protecting our children.
So you think, as in most things, if we shine light on it, then we have a better chance
It's not
of.
a thought, it's evidenced. That's a lot of evidence. It's not a personal opinion. It's a fact that the more we have knowledge about this stuff, the less likely we are to have to repeat those survival mechanisms. We can make choices, more effective choices, and change our behavior. And when we change our behavior, we change everything.
I should have interviewed you for the book. That's well, no, that's really good. That is encouraging.
Yeah, without a doubt, your journey is saving, to, for want of an overused term, your journey is saving your soul, without a doubt, and that of your children, without a doubt. You know,
Yeah.
it's a very honorable task as far as I can see. And particularly as a guy, I'm really interested as a guy because the typical response of men, particularly of our type of generation, is leave it alone. It's the dog sleeping, just let it lie. But somehow you won't do that. And is that part of who you are as a person?
I think so. I mean, I think so. Things touch me pretty deeply, and
Yeah,
I first noticed that in the hospital, where other doctors were sort of moving on from death of one of our patients. I wasn't. And so each time that happened, a little piece of me got lost. And I
right,
write about this in my first book, Exhale, because that eventually drove me out of clinical practice of
right.
transplant because I didn't have any reservoir left.
Yeah,
And I noticed, I saw it coming, but I couldn't do much about it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe it's just time to move on anyway. It sounds like you've gone on in a direction and journey which is I think of crucial importance, not just for you, but for a whole generation of guys that have these types of experiences. I'm just a bit aware of time and sort of like playing with that and what's going on. So first of all, tell us what the title of this latest book is.
It's Tell Me I Belong, A Journey Across Faiths and Generations.
Yeah. And tell me I belong. And that's like quite an important request.
It is.
Who were
I,
you asking that of, do you think?
the world. It's
Right.
actually interesting because this is my third book. It's the first title that I actually came up with.
Right.
And I'm not good at titling books, but I feel like that I hit this one because I think this whole search was about belonging. It
Yeah.
was about, look, I want this world to tell me that somehow I fit into it. And that's what I want. And that's why I became a transplant doctor, so that I would get that gratitude. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it came to me in the middle of the night, as most things do. So,
Yeah. Has somebody told you you belong yet?
no, no, I hope after reading the book, maybe they will. But the closest I've really come, obviously my daughters, provide that kind of love and affection, but my patients actually provided a
Really?
lot. The one thing I miss very deeply about clinical practice is the gratitude that your patients will show you. And that's hard to replace in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say you've come to a place where you've embraced a religious understanding that you're more comfortable with now?
Yeah, I'm Jewish
Right.
and I
And not
embrace
just
that.
by inheritance and not just because it by accident.
No,
You
no,
embrace a historical heritage, but a religious heritage, right?
definitely. And it's something that I can say after a few years of working on this book and studying that I can say comfortably, whereas I couldn't say that before.
Okay. And what sort of branch of religion is, or branch of Judaism? Like in the UK, there's various bits and bobs.
Yeah. Right. I likely, I underline likely reform,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
but at the same time, I'm not even deep enough into it at this stage of the game to know that. I want to do more work on that.
And do you observe Shabbat and that sort of thing and Passover, etc., or is that
Not right now.
okay?
I'm kind of, it's almost like I was just born and I'm kind of forming my uh, Judaism.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of figuring out what it's going to look like for me.
And it's
Um,
it's really interesting for me because the bit of London I live in is a strong Orthodox
is
tradition.
it? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The big furry brimmed hats
right,
and
right,
sort of Friday evening, everything shuts down and
right.
all of that
Right.
sort of stuff. And it's extraordinary. And there's something, some people not a dislike. They're like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you integrate more? But there's something that I think is very celebratory about it, that somebody can feel comfortable enough to really, really inhabit every aspect of their perception of their identity
I
to the
think that's
point where they're wearing clothes that are hundreds of years out of date, and look odd, but they're really inhabiting it. So, and I'm guessing that type of dedication to it is somehow inspiring to you.
it is, and I think Shabbat is interesting as a
Yeah.
concept in this world, especially taking 24 hours to sort of
Yeah.
shut it and
Yeah.
have conversation with one another instead of, taking your phone and being plastered to it all day long.
Yeah, because
That,
of course the technology is off, isn't it? You're not allowed to use it, and
yes,
perhaps it's
that's
very human. Yeah,
that's attractive to me.
is it?
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it is because I'm like nearly everyone, I guess, at this point, overwhelmed by the amount of,
yeah.
dings and clicks and phone
I've
calls
got them
and
all turned off. I just don't have anything on anymore.
do you? Yeah, have
No
you been able?
alerts at all. I've just turned them off. I can't do it. I just
Yeah,
found myself going like this all the time, and so yeah,
yeah,
can't do it. I can't do life like that.
I know. I'm gonna have to work on that. I'm not there yet. I need to work on that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, like my phone and my watch are connected, but I have alerts off and to a minimum and all of that sort of stuff, and I don't allow my phone to interrupt my life. Um,
Smart.
yeah, it's just because it activates me in a way that makes me feel ill, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's all. How do your family feel about this? Or they like, oh, he's been, how many religions has he been now?
Yeah. My daughters have a little bit of that.
Do they?
But I think, like most kids, they want whatever
Yeah.
is best for me.
Yeah.
And that's where they are. But they're like, okay, wait a minute. So
What are you
because
today, Dad?
yeah, exactly. I mean, what's next?
Uh,
There is no what's next. This is it as it relates to religion.
yeah. Yeah. So you've come to your spiritual home, you feel,
Yes. Yeah, I feel comfortable there.
right? And you've journeyed physically and emotionally. You've been to another part of America. You've come back to the home where you grew up, and
Yeah.
you're reconnecting with your Jewish community in New Orleans.
Yes. I had some conversations already with some rabbis as my book
Wow,
comes
that
out.
must be really exciting, David.
It is. It
I
really
can't
is.
imagine how wonderful that must be feel for you.
It is. And also, I think the people that I'm talking to are excited for me because they think I'm a blank slate as it relates to a lot of this. And I think that's exciting too.
Right.
So, I'm going to learn more about it. I like to learn things, and I'm going to learn more about what all this means.
Right. So tell us again what the book is called and where people can get hold of it.
So, Tell Me I Belong, A Journey Across Faiths and Generations, and available December 9th, wherever you buy books.
Okay.
But for those that are interested, I have a website, geniusly named davidweill.com. There's links to
You
all the.
nailed that one.
I really did. It took me a while to think of that. It was like the title of my book. And so,
Great.
anyway, there are links there. You can find the book. It's easy to find. It's being published by Hachette, um, one of the publishers here in the States. So
What a pleasure to catch up with you again. And I'm so happy you found a home.
thank you, Noel. I enjoyed the conversation very much.
You stay there, mate. Thanks everybody for joining us. Do subscribe, like the channel, do tell me what you like and what you don't like. Tell me what you'd like to hear more about. I'd always appreciate your comments and thoughts and suggestions. And I'll see you all at the next episode of the Wellbeing Show. So bye bye for now.